The broken and ripped out hearts of Bills Mafia, piled mile high, had not even cooled off when the Buffalo Bills fired head coach Sean McDermott. Wow. Well, I've got some different takes for you on this matter today on the Ralph Rant. Let's go.
Welcome to the Ralph Rant, your source for hard-hitting Buffalo Bills takes. Now, here's your host of the Ralph Rant, that veteran watcher of generations of Bills teams, the prophet who predicted Josh Allen's greatness, that opinionated so-and-so you've walked out on parties because of, the Ralph.
Welcome to the Ralph Rant. I am your host, the Ralph. Thank you ever so much for being here. Well, we thought we would be talking about news of the Bills headed to the AFC Championship game this week, but instead, we're talking about the news that the Bills have fired head coach Sean McDermott, who experienced his own Black Monday just yesterday as of this recording. Now, there are a lot of opinions out there about it. There are those that are kind of happy. Someone's been blamed. It's a little bit of salve on the wound, perhaps, of the loss from Saturday. And there are others that are actually quite worried about what could become of the Buffalo Bills with this development. Now, I've got some different takes on it myself. Before I get into them, though, thank you ever so much, as I always say, for all the support of the channel. We have a lot of new subscribers, and certainly we were hoping for 2,000 by the time the Super Bowl rolled around. I was basing that on the Bills actually going to the Super Bowl. But nonetheless, we will continue to bring you NFL content and, of course, the news on this business of the firing of Sean McDermott and what has developed at One Bills Drive in its place. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, first of all, the Seismic Beane shift. Seismic Beane sounds like it could be a great name for a punk band, but it's what I'm calling the power struggle at One Bills Drive that seems to be revealed by this situation. Then I've got a segment on the disconnected sideline. This is something I've talked about through the season a little bit. Then Terry Pegula, the fan, and I believe Pegula plays a part in this, and I've got a thought on where his mind might be with all of this. Then the rookie coach indictment. Well, what are we talking about there? We'll find out. And finally, the parallel way. Yes, the parallel way, a little play on words, and you might guess what I'm talking about there, but it's time to talk about all of these segments, so let's blow the horn and go. In an offseason where there are shocking head coach firings, the dismissal of head coach Sean McDermott from the Buffalo Bills has to be one of the most shocking. And why not? McDermott had a great record with the Bills, 5 division championships, playoffs 7 years straight, 8 out of 9 years, I believe. You don't find that, and you never find a story of someone being dismissed after that kind of record. And while we always thought that Sean McDermott was the head of the Bills, the CEO, the boss, and I believe he was, obviously a power struggle has been afoot for some time. Because you don't do an emotional firing of a coach after a heart-rending playoff loss when this team probably belongs in the Super Bowl. Brandon Beane has always stated in his postseason press conferences that your loss in the playoffs always exposes your biggest flaws. And I think this season he's talking about the biggest flaw being the head coach and perhaps the coaching of this team. And if that is the case, this is obviously premeditated. And if it's premeditated, that means that there is probably some kind of plan in place. And if it's premeditated, that means it's been going on for some time. But we can see examples of that. The strange circumstances with the drafting of Keon Coleman that Josh Allen wanted, where a first-round pick was not used and we traded out of the first to get him at the top of the second. And then, of course, there was the public discipline of Keon Coleman by McDermott. Very strange for a guy who's usually pretty private about his conversations. And then we saw more. This very odd trade deadline situation where Brandon Beane came out very sorry that he couldn't pull off a deal that he tried in getting Jalen Waddle but he wouldn't give up the Bills' first-round pick in the 2026 draft for Jalen Waddle. Now, to me, it looks like he was saying, no, McDermott, I'm not going to save your job by bringing in this guy, which then leads us to believe, if that's the case, who was really influencing what was happening on the Bills roster? But then there's other interesting situations that make you question Brandon Beane. Bringing in Darius Slay, who had no desire to be here, that lost us Marcus Ingram, that put Max Hairston on the field in a meaningless game against the Jets and got him hurt. Who knows if that makes a difference this past weekend. But it looks as though the Bills are looking at it as another playoff loss in sort of the same way, where we got to the end and it was left up to the officials. And that's why I think McDermott is gone. That's why I think it was premeditated. That's why I think there was a power struggle. Brandon Beane has won that seismic shift. But now they better make sure they get this right with whatever plan they have, because you still have Josh Allen and you cannot regress. And if you're trying to exceed what Sean McDermott did, boy, you better have the right guy. Let's move on. For years now, Brandon Beane has told us in his postseason press conference that it is that last game, your exit from the playoffs, that most closely demonstrates what your flaws are as a team. And he's mentioned those following those seasons in that press conference. Well, he hasn't had one yet this season, but the firing of head coach Sean McDermott, I think, is the statement of what the flaws were. And though we don't know Brandon Beane's mind, maybe we could actually speculate a little bit on some of the things that might be at issue. Because these are issues that I've had and actually spoke about early in the season, when I put out a couple of videos over the bye about the attitude on the sideline. And yes, I think this is a disconnected sideline for the Bills. There just doesn't seem to be any attitude on the part of coaches on the sideline. Whoever speaks with Josh Allen goes up in quiet tones, just speaking of things. There's no impassioned yelling. We don't see McDermott with his defense, and we believe he's been calling the defense most of the season. We did not see McDermott get in front of his players giving impassioned speeches. We don't see him throwing a headset down or getting upset. We don't see him getting in the face of a referee. It's reserved. It's rigid. It's tight. And that's how his team played quite a bit. Now, there are no other impassioned coaches on the sideline. It's like they're not allowed. And the two guys that might be, your offensive and defensive coordinators, are both up in the booth in that regime. And that's unheard of in the NFL. They're the only team in the league with both coordinators in the booth. These guys like to talk to their players. But McDermott didn't like that. The last one he had that really did that was Brian Daboll. And he couldn't get Daboll out of there fast enough, and you haven't seen anyone else on the sideline in a coordinator's job with that team since. I'm talking offensive and defensive, not Chris Tabor, the special teams coordinator. And there's more to that tightness. There's the fear of playing rookies. This is a guy that never wanted to give rookies time, as if it's so precious that you cannot screw up a game by putting a rookie in there. We have to be absolutely sure that you're absolutely good enough to be out there. That puts some nice pressure on a young guy who's trying to get out on the field. And that goes hand in hand with the fact that the team, and I'm guessing this is under McDermott, he was the CEO, was he not? That the team liked bringing in these old familiar faces, players that had been there before. There just seems to be a rigidity to it, and sort of a lifeless, sort of bloodless, emotionless sort of scene on the sideline. And I don't think the players had any fear of this coach. Not that you want to have an adversarial relationship, but there's got to be an alpha. This is football. And McDermott never came off as the alpha on the sideline. And quite frankly, getting back to the point about the playoffs exposing your biggest flaws, well, one of the biggest flaws the Bills have had in all of these playoff exits has been the fact that often it's the defense that can't get a stop to preserve a win. And it just happened again this past Saturday. So for people that think Sean McDermott was awesome, and he is, and they better have a great replacement because it's going to be tough to come in and match that performance, it still just wasn't good enough. And I think these are some of the reasons why. Stick with me. Many fans tend to not think very highly of team owners, and that, of course, includes Terry Pegula. Some like to think he's a money-grubbing guy. Some think he's taking the taxpayers for this stadium and all of these other stories that you hear about many owners, but I don't really believe that about Terry Pegula. I think he's a huge fan of the team. I think he's very involved. We see him in every single post-game locker room victory speech when those videos are published by the Bills. So he's there. He's involved. We see how excited he is showing off the new stadium to some of the players in some of the videos we saw over the summer. He's in the draft war room. He's always right there. This is a very involved owner. I think he's a fan of the team. And I think he wants great things. And he also has a little bit tough also. His wife, of course, had the medical situation. And now things aren't the same for them. And Kim, of course, had so much input into what the new stadium is becoming. This is very important to him. And winning a Super Bowl is very important to him. And I think he loved Sean McDermott like we did, but realized that it just wasn't getting there. And I have to give him a little bit of credit. I mean, after all, a guy that's a businessman, that he's done as much as he's done and made the money he's made, he must know a couple of things about running groups of people. We'll see. We'll definitely see. But I think Terry Pegula is a fan, because if he wasn't, you'd just keep Sean McDermott here for another 9 years and early playoff exits and keep those seats filled for that entire time. More to come. Of all of the indictments that could be made on Sean McDermott for not getting the Bills over the hump, perhaps one of the biggest would be how other rookie and second-year head coaches are doing in this league. And this season points it out really well. Mike Macdonald is a second-year head coach with the Seahawks. He made the playoffs last season with a different quarterback. Number one seed this season with Sam Darnold. They're probably going to win the Super Bowl. Or how about Liam Cohen with the Jaguars? Team had an 8-game winning streak, ended by the Bills in the wild card playoff game. Many had the Jaguars as the AFC representative to the Super Bowl with a first-year head coach. Or Ben Johnson, who should probably be taking the Bears to the NFC title game, but of course just lost in overtime the other night. Another first-year head coach doing great things. And then, of course, the biggest example, Mike Vrabel, who is not a rookie head coach. He coached 6 years with the Titans. but in his first year with the Patriots, took them to the number 2 seed, took the division away from the Bills, have sailed through their playoff games, and now are probably going to the Super Bowl, not only thanks to the Bills just losing to the Denver Broncos in the horrifying fashion they did, but also leaving behind a door prize for the Patriots in the form of fracturing Bo Nix's ankle. So the Patriots are almost certainly going to the Super Bowl with a first-year head coach and a second-year quarterback that does not have the talent of Josh Allen. And yet they're there and the Bills are not. You can ask a lot of questions as to why McDermott is no longer the coach of the Bills. But that question you have to ask. Let's close it out. So again, we were hoping this would be an exciting week of talking about the Bills headed to New England for the AFC title game. Instead, it is a week kind of filled with some gloom and doom with the dismissal of Sean McDermott as head coach of the Buffalo Bills. However, there is a parallel to this story in history, and I'm calling it the parallel way because it involves John Elway and actually involves those same Denver Broncos to which the Bills just lost this weekend. Now, John Elway was drafted by the Broncos. His draft story is kind of interesting and convoluted. We don't need to get into it here, but he ended up with the Broncos. The Broncos were coached by Dan Reeves, highly respected head coach, very successful with Elway. Whereas McDermott did not even make 3 AFC championships with Josh Allen, Dan Reeves made 3 Super Bowls with John Elway, and they lost them all. So Dan Reeves was fired after that last Super Bowl loss. He was actually replaced by the Denver offensive coordinator, Mike Shanahan, of course, father to Kyle Shanahan, current San Francisco 49ers head coach. And the rest is history. Elway went on to win 2 Super Bowls in a row at a much older age than Josh Allen is right now. So hopefully the Bills have this figured out and know that this is what they need to do in replacing McDermott. You need to pull a Shanahan like the Broncos did when they fired Reeves. And hopefully they'll get that figured out because what everyone wants is the same thing, and that's for the Bills to hold that Vince Lombardi trophy. So we'll see how this proceeds. We'll keep the info coming on it. But in the meantime, thanks so much for watching. Again, if you're new to the channel, please take the nanosecond required to hit that like button and subscribe button. You'll become part of the channel. Leave your comments, of course. They empower what we talk about. And we'll see how this Bills head coach search goes, because they better be sure when trying to pull off their own version of Reeves to Shanahan and a couple of Super Bowls for a star quarterback. Thanks again. Be good, do good, God bless, and go Bills. I am the Ralph, and this is the Ralph Rant. Out.